I have a very beautiful story about Hekevis, including how exactly the Rebbe reacted immediately when he heard the news of the Notzach in his room. But before that, let's go back a year and a half when the whole problem began to come to light, and the first thing that we had to do, Agudas Chasidus Chabad had to do, was to stop more Sfarim from disappearing and being stolen. So they got a restraining order, but even before that, it was set up that there should always be 24/7 mishmaris, bachrim, learning day and night. 2 bachrim would be sitting at the apartment of the Frierdiker Rebbe on the second floor of 770. That's upstairs. You take the back stairs next to Gan Eden HaTachton. That's the apartment of the Frierdiker Rebbe, to make sure that nobody comes there to pilfer and to remove any further objects. But Moshe Meir Vogel was a young man at that time. He's from Manchester originally. He lives now in Pittsburgh. He's the son-in-law of Rabbi Yedidenu, Rabbi Manas Friedman. And he told me this story on Sukkot last year, Hakel. He was one of the Bachrim. He was sitting and learning. Then he went back to Manchester for a Simcha, I believe. He came back and he had a bad cold, a bad cough that he caught. And he was coughing away. Suddenly, Rabbi Benjamin Klein appears on the second floor with a large jar of honey. This is honey from Kfar Chabad, from the Schneerson's beehives. They would send the Rebbe a jar of honey, very big size, every year. And he said, the Rebbe heard you coughing, and he said you should take this honey and put it in some tea, and it'll improve everything. Now, a year and a couple of months later, on Hey Tevis, Tovshin Mem Zayin, on the actual Hey Tevis, he had something that he wanted to submit to the Rebbe, and he was close with Rabbi Krinsky. So he went next door to 788 with this letter or whatever it was, and he sees Rabbi, it's about 10 o'clock in the morning, and Rabbi Krinsky is putting on his coat. And he says, it's early in the day, what are you putting on your coat? So he said, we just got a call from the court that the verdict has been printed, and to pick it up. So I'm going to the court. He said, how are you going? He said, I'm going by car. And who's in the car? Rabbi Yossi Friedman, and another person. Is there room for a fourth one? And he said, sure, okay, come along. He came along. They got to the court. Rabbi Krinsky started reading the verdict, maybe a page or so, a page and a half, and then suddenly he decided he went to the last page. See what's the final word? It's about 40 pages, I think. And he saw it was the Dan Notzach. The car, Rabbi Krinsky's car had a car phone. It's the same technology as the cell phone, but it was very, very large, very heavy and very expensive. But he had that because there were different times when he had to make calls from the oil, where people had to get emergency calls to the oil. So he called up on the car phone. He figured the Rebbe shouldn't have to wait 45 minutes till I drive back to 770. He phoned up to the office. Rabbi Klein answered the phone, and he told him, as the Dan Notzach, please tell the Rebbe, and I'm coming back. I'm coming back to 770. So Rabbi Klein went to the Rebbe's room, and there was a rule amongst the Maskirim that if you wanted to go into the Rebbe, not having been invited, you had to knock on the door, and the Rebbe let you in. But if there was a maskir who was already in the Rebbe's room, that meant that room at that moment was like an office, and you could go in without knocking. And Rabbi Groner was there, not working with the Rebbe himself. He's doing some work in the Rebbe's room for the Rebbe. So he just opened the door, and he saw the Rebbe was riveted, was engrossed in learning something very deeply in the Sefer. And so he walked and he made sure that his steps made noise, but the Rebbe did not notice anything. And then after a couple of seconds, Rabbi Groner made some signal by hand signals back and forth, but the Rebbe didn't notice. He was standing there for 5, 6, 7 minutes. I don't know exactly how long. It was like a long time, a longish time. Now, in the meanwhile, Rabbi Krinsky, after he got off the phone from the office, the next thing he did was he phoned the Rebbetzin Chaya Mushke to let her know the good news. And the Rebbetzin told Reb Chaim Baruch Halberstam, I guess he maybe was in the house at the time, and he right away went out and got a big loudspeaker and music, live music, and such a guitar, and he was dancing and singing the Dan Notzach, and Rabbi Klein is standing there in the office waiting to tell the Rebbe, and suddenly music blares out, blasting out, and when that big noise came, the Rebbe looked up and said, "What's Hashem? What happened?" So Rabbi Klein said, Rabbi Krinsky called up 10, 15 minutes, whenever it was, and said to tell the Rebbe that the Dan Notzach, the verdict came out, and it's the Dan Notzach. So the Rebbe said, when he arrives back at 770, tell him to come in here with the verdict. And then the Rebbe looked back down in his sefer, just as engrossed as he was a half a minute before, in the same thing. And that story is the story of a Nasi. It's the story of the Rebbe who learned and was so deeply involved that he was oblivious to everything around him and didn't hear a thing. But what he did hear was a bacha coughing through the oak thick doors upstairs, through another set of oak thick doors. That the Rebbe did hear and did something about it as well. And it reminded me of the story of the Alter Rebbe with the Mittler Rebbe, that the Mittler Rebbe didn't hear when his little baby daughter fell out of the crib. And the Alter Rebbe said, you have to taka be engrossed, but you have to be able to hear the Koil Yeled. I was going to give everyone a rest before Yontif, but I had a couple of requests to say something about Hu Alakeinu and the Rebbe teaching it. So I'll try to be mekatze and speak generally about the nigunim which the Rebbe taught Simchas Torah morning. It's all reported and it's in Hanochas. I'll tell you a little bit of a personal observation on each of the nigunim that I saw, just to start to look at the general thing. The Rebbe would finish Hakofas about 3 o'clock in the morning, probably 3:30. It was long because selling out the Hareisa until the late Lamids, the selling of a Hataresa would be an hour and a half maybe. It was a very long time. Later they started getting people's pledges in Chalamoyed before Yontiv, so they were just able to read out the names, and that procedure became much shorter. The Rebbe would go upstairs to the second floor to the Frierdiker Rebbe's apartment for Sudas Yomtiv, came down probably somewhere between 4 and 5, and he would be there for maybe an hour or two. There was a crowd pressed, but it was probably not more than a couple hundred people. I don't know, but everyone was crowded near the Rebbe. I knew at least one person from Torah V'das who did not come to Hakofis. He was like he considered himself close to Lubavitch, but he used to come and walk from Borough Park every year just to hear the Rebbe teach a niggin. His galus of the Rebbe, this was a very special aspect of the Rebbe. The Rebbe taught nigunim, other nigunim as well, some which he revived, like Utzuetza and Shibana Beis HaMikdash, Hisha'omda, but these were 10 nigunim that the Rebbe taught him Chatzar in the morning, are in a category of their own, I always thought of it like the Aseres Nigunim of the Alter Rebbe, Notes Tchilosim B'Soifon. The Rebbe had 10 Nigunim of Simchas Torah in the morning. There were two parts to this Farbrengen. One was the Rebbe introducing, explaining, and teaching a nigun, and the other was the Rebbe distributing mashke to anybody who undertakes to increase limud hachsidus that year. The Rebbe was his galus, very approachable, sort of. It was the Rebbe's day. It was very intimate. Something like the Farbrengens in Tovshin Chav Hei, which was the first time we saw the Rebbe with a sefer at the Farbrengen, with a chumash. Until then, the only sefer was the Rebbe's siddur when he had l'chaim and mizoinus, but otherwise you didn't see a sefer. And the whole tone, if you look at the Hanachas even in Tovshin Chav Hei, was very, very close kiruvdik. But Simchas Torah morning, it was much, much more. And it was Yechida Shebenefesh. It's the Rebbe's day, Yechida Shebedor. The day was special, and the Rebbe connected the whole of Kodesh Tishrei in all of those siches and in all of those nigunim. Practically every nigun had to do with the Yomim Neiroim. The Rebbe would give an introduction, sing the nigun, once or twice maybe, and the Rebbe would then give mashke. So there was a certain tension there. You wanted to be near the Rebbe, as near as possible, on the one hand. The other hand, there had to be a seder, a line going by the Rebbe, and in the middle, while the line was going, let's say the Rebbe would give out mashke for 10, 15 minutes, then he would stop abruptly and sing the nigun again, and possibly say something more about that nigun. I was not there in Tovshin Tezayim when the Rebbe taught Darkei Cholokenu. No one knew about it beforehand. I learned that nigun on Yutes Kislev from Rabbi Geshem Mendel Gorelik, who taught 2 years. I learned by him in Torah V'das Tanya, and they had a Farbrengen Yutes Kislev. Kionu Amecha, I have a regret to this day. I did not go. I was still in Torah V'das, but I should have known better. But from Tovshin Yud Ches until Chav Dalid, when the Rebbe taught the other 8 nigunim, Baruch Hashem, I was there. In Kionu Amecha, it's known that the Rebbe said that this nigun has 2 parts. The first part is a tzaddik. It's the straightforward Kionu Amecha that they sing on Yom Tov all the time. And then there's the second part, which is a repetitive. Sorry, that's Atam Chatonu. I take that back, what I just said. It's only the tzaddik. The Kionu Amecha that the Rebbe taught in Tovshin Tezayim was the tzaddik, and the one that he taught in Chav Dalid was the Baal Tshuva. It was Atam Chatonu, which was divided into 2, which I'll come to in a minute. Tovshin Yud Ches, the Rebbe taught Tzomel Chonavshi Echdidu Maka, spoke about the Yetzirah, a Lebedik Nigun, even though it's about a Tzimon to the Eibishter and about the Melech Zochen Uksil. Tovshin Yud Ches was Meyuchad B'minoi. There was a tremendous intensity when the Rebbe spoke about Shamil, the Nimshal, and the Rebbe was holding a bottle of mashke. There was the small bottles of mashke that the Rebbe gave out from at these events, at these Farbrengens or whatever you call it. And he was holding the bottle of mashke and like opening and closing the cover while he said, I remember one part with B'chias Niflois, Noirois, when the Rebbe spoke about the neshama is in prison, even the biggest tzaddik. What kind of prison is neshama? It says in Tanya that a tzaddik who is oived ha'chlaya be'yira be'ava be'tanugim, you cannot compare it to the Ava that the Neshama had Lamaila. And when the Rebbe said that, it was very, very emotional. In Tovshin Chof was Rachmana. That was the last niggin that was sung with the Rebbe standing on a box, on a like a milk crate or something, on a wooden box, because later on they had the shul and the Rebbe was on the bima on the front of the shul. He stood, but it was near the place where there was the Farbrengens. And in Rachmana, what I remember is that I was right beneath the Rebbe when he stopped abruptly and sang it again, and I saw clearly, as the Rebbe sang the niggin, there were two streams of tears, Zolgu ein of demois kipshutai, as he sang this niggin. And in the Sichos, the Rebbe said, as is probably reported in the Hanochis, Vos mes wird sein, the Svida Liebe, als mehr wird sein the Anenu. The more there will be the broken-hearted list, the more there will be the response from Hashem. In Tavshin Chaf Aleph was Anem Zemiris, a famous story. Tavshin Chaf Aleph was Ata B'chatonu, and here there was Tzaddik and the Baal Tshuva. The first part that they sing in the davening all the time, I mean, that's tzaddik. And then, there's there's the repetition, as it says in Tanya Perik in Igeres HaTshuva Perik Tes, the Baal Tshuva is everything is kiflayim, and it's a person that's agitated, that's singing that second part. Chav Beis was Anam Zemiris, and the Rebbe there, at some after some stage, said, if anyone who knows, sing with. And what I remember is that Rabbi Chadakov knew the niggin, and he sang it. He was the only person. It didn't. A lot of it didn't work there. So I was holding in the middle of when the Rebbe said by Anam Zemiris, Davis faced the niggin, and I remember Rabbi Chadakov because with his distinctive accent, like I remember him singing it when alone. And the story of Anam Zemiris. Then there was in Tovshin Chav Gimel was Tavia Pitu, and there the Rebbe said it's a niggin of a Baal Tshuva. All in Nigunim he spoke about the whole Tishrei, and it has pieces of the Tfilos of Tishrei. It's in Hebrew, it's in Yiddish, it's in Russian and Ukrainian, 4 different languages, like the agitation of a Baal Tshuva. And the Rebbe, when he was teaching it and looking for people who chap the niggin quickly, the Rebbe said, "Vu de Moller, where is the artist?" He was looking for Reb Hendel, who wasn't there. I said there was, there was a crowd, but it was not a gigantic crowd. All these nigunim. I also remember, by the way, going back, but I think it was by Shamiel's niggin, and somebody was questioning the way Reb Yoel was singing it, and the Rebbe told this person as mein Chayzer, something to that effect, like leave him alone. And now, so for Chavdalid, the Rebbe came down and made 2 announcements. I'm not sure the order of the 2. I think right away the Rebbe said that he's going to teach 2 nigunim this year, but he is giving like a warning, and maybe he even said in order to continue this in future years. I don't remember, but the Rebbe said that anybody who did not experience, practice, dedicate a Haishofen Chassidus in the past year, not the future, this is not a Kabbalah for the future. Whoever didn't do it in the past, do not come from Ashke. And I'm sure that most people did not go up from Ashke on that occasion. And I also think that those who did go, were either very big Hasidim who were very medactic, or people who didn't really understand that the Rebbe meant, just emphasizing. But at some stage, the Rebbe said, everyone's coming, even kids under bar mitzvah, and was zayin iber ayah veisich nicht. He said those words. What will happen next year, I don't know. And that sounded like saying that this is the end. But since I promised another niggun for this year, we're going to sing it. And he taught Hu Elokeinu. This niggun of Hu Elokeinu, we used to sing it even in Montreal. I think the part of Hengu Al Yeschem was not part of that original niggun, and some people thought that the Rebbe himself added that niggun, that hi, and in Lubavitch, in the village Lubavitch, there was a chazan called Yechiel the Chazan, a very, very famous chazan. And he matched this niggun to these words, and the Rebbe taught the niggun. During the singing of the niggun, either that night, that 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, or 6, 7 o'clock, and when in the Yom Simchas Torah, when the Rebbe would teach the niggun again and say a few more words, and the Chazan sang it, and the Rebbe said, or maybe when the whole Olam was singing it, and it was maybe not as shturimdik as the Rebbe wanted, the Rebbe said, as Yechiel the Chazan wollt gesehen, am singt the niggun on a shturim, wollt herrsch gemacht a shturim. If Yechiel, who connected the niggun with these words, would see, you're singing it without a storm, without an intensity, he would make an intense storm himself in protest. And another time was the Chazan sang it, and he said, but it came to ay, and I think he skipped out that part, and the Rebbe said, wo the Yiddische Krechts? Where's the Yiddische Krechts? And also in that niggun, the Rebbe said that the Ikke, the Nekuda, the point of that whole song is the words Hengu Al Yeschem Achas Kevereshis. That's another union of the Geula and Mashiach is the important part of that niggun. Now, so that was the completion of 10 nigunim Simchas Torah in the morning. It's a set. Even any other nigunim the Rebbe taught with Samachol Nafshi and the Hisham, whatever, this was a set of these 10. Now the next year, the Rebbe didn't harp on, didn't go on and saying, well, no, there's not going to be any more. So, I'm sure I certainly, as a younger man, just married, thought maybe we have a chance. And when it came the next year, Simchas Torah, the night of Simchas Torah, and there was Hatareis, and then there was Hakafis, I thought, since it's just 2 weeks after the Rebbe's mother passed away, maybe he will not want to do something of not singing, which would seem like a Veilus on Yom Tov or something. Maybe we have a chance. We would never know. Let's wait if the Rebbe goes out. At the end, after the last Kaddish, the Rebbe said, he made an announcement. We spoke last year, he said something to the effect that last year we concluded the inyan of Nigunim Simchas Torah in the morning, and I will therefore sing one of the previous ones, and here I personally remember that the one that the Rebbe sang was Ata B'chatonu, and I remember also, he did not say Ata B'chatonu, it was the second part. He said, Ayay Ata B'chatonu. That's how I remember it. I remember that, I must say, I burst out crying then, because it meant this is it. After a whole year hoping that maybe we'll get it back. Yedidi, Horav HaChosid, Harav HaGoyin, Rabbi Leibel Shapiro, and his Zichronos a few years ago, I heard this whole story, but he said he had a different one. I don't remember which one he said that the Rebbe sang. Later I spoke to him, maybe the time of the Kinnos, I met him. I had the biggest respect for the memory of accuracy of memory of him, and by the way of Reb Shlomo Zachi. I never discussed this with him. Also, it seems very accurate in what he says, but to me, in my memory, it's very firmly implanted that it was Ata B'Chatanu. And now we have those nigunim. They are a summary of Tishrei. They are a summary of the Yomim Noidoim, Simchas Torah, are all one thing. Achas Shoalti. It says in Chassidus that refers to Yechidah Shebanefesh. That's why David enumerated other qualities, even though he said Achas, because Yechidah permeates and illuminates all the other parts of a person. And it's the Rebbe's day, the Rebbe's Ushpiz, the Rebbe's, we saw it when the Rebbe taught these Nigunim, and Simchas Torah is man mesugul to reacquaint ourselves and with these Nigunim, and the Rebbe is to help, and everyone should have a good Yom Tov. Afreilichen Yidalef Nissen, let's hope that we all derive as much as we can from this special Yom Mesugel and Yom Bohir. 3 little bullet points. Number 1, in Tafshin Chof Beis, which I mentioned that the Rebbe in Maidiv on the Monday night, which was Orle Yud Gimel Nissan, the Rebbe gave Reb Shmuel Levitin $61 bills, and I don't think I mentioned that the Rebbe said with it, I heard this myself, that the Rebbe said, Mizol mamshich zayin von di drei teg al kol hashana. To draw down the koiches from these 3 days, al pi pashtus, Yud Aleph Yud Beis Yud Gimel Nissen, and from there we see that this is not just a fantastic, elated day, Yom Malkeinu, but it's Yemei Teischa. It's something which can enhance and empower us for the entire year in our Avodah. Talking about our Avodah, the second Nekuda is that the Shir Tanya in Hashanah Uberes on Yud Aleph Nissen is the beginning of Perik Mem Aleph, and which has V'hina Havai Nitzav Olav, which is a Perik, and of those few lines, the Rebbe referred certainly hundreds, probably thousands of people and times, including a few times myself, to overcome the struggles of the time today. In order to have the control of Machshava Dibur and Maisa, it requires Yira Tator, which is the subject there, to picture that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is standing with you all the time. Havai Nitzav Olav. That is the Shir Tanya in Hashanah Uberes, and in Hashanah Pshuta, like this year, it's Perik Lamed Tes, maybe half an omid, but it's also on that same subject, and the last few lines especially are almost the same words, and the last words of the Shir Tanya are Kamashi Yisboya Lakamon, and it's referring to Perik Mem Aleph, the beginning. The third Nekuda, I say this from memory, but it's very clear memory, about maybe 40 years ago. One of the Yud Aleph Nissens that we heard here in London on a shidur, on a hookup. And the Rebbe said that people will be writing, or maybe it was before Yud Aleph Nissen, but the Rebbe said people will be writing for Yud Aleph Nissen onwünschen, to give brachas to the Rebbe, that you should include also your shiurim b'Torah. And the Rebbe mentioned, it's like semi-niyuma, you have Rachmanas on me, I shouldn't have to read so much, or everything you're going to write. He said, the Bereda is by me. You write me, give me the choice to read it or not, but you should write what your shiurim b'Torah are. And believe me, I personally try to write to the Rebbe every year, Ada Yom Hazeh, on Yud Aleph Nissen, and I try to include basically the shiurim b'Torah which I have, and I'm suggesting that to every person who can manage that. Sei gesund, a freilichen Yud Aleph Nissen, a kosher a freilichen Pesach. A story about the visits that I was zocher to with Rebbe Chana on Yud Aleph Nissen. As I mentioned in the previous time, in Tavshin Chav Gimel, I came back with a package from Rabbi Shemtiv, and was told by Rabbi David Raskin that Chassidim went there, and somehow or another, I made sure that I was there again in Tavshin Chav Daled. They also went Chav Av, but Chav Gimel I was in England for America Shlichus. Right after Achasna, the Rebbe said it's called America Shlichus. But in Chav Daled, we went there. The apartment, I should say, it was in 1418, on the bottom floor, in the back, I believe on the left side. And when you went in, there was a little turn into right, and there was this room, a sitting room. It was not a very big room. And on the wall was a framed picture. It was quite popular in those days, of all the Rabbeim, the 5 that we have a picture of, and Ksav Yad of the Mittler Rebbe and the Rebbe Maharash. That was up on the wall in that room. She sat at the head of the table. There must have been, how many people could it fit? You know, it was probably 6 or 8. Almost sure that was less than a minyan, around the table. And, there was Benedictine, which she served out, and people said L'chaim and ungewünscht dem Rebbe. And when it came that part, they would talk, this and the other, then they said L'chaim, the Rebbetzin was leading. So she said, L'chaim soll sein gut. And one of the elder Chassidim who was there said, I know what you mean. Sometimes you want to give a bracha, but you're not sure of the specific bracha, so you say a general bracha, soll sein gut. And the Rebbe Chana smiled and she said, no, the specific bracha is soll sein gut. Es kommt. That was the story, and that story has been a very powerful one in my own life. I never shared it really with the Rebbe because I didn't want to bother the Rebbe with anything that wasn't necessary. It was, I think, a very nourisher attitude, but that's how I was until Tavshin Nun Aleph. In Tavshin Nun Aleph, it was the beginning of Shnas HaTzadik. And I was in New York. I was staying in the basement near 770. And I suddenly realized the pasuk in Yeshaya, right near the beginning, Imru leTzadik Kitov, tell the Tzadik is good, and is good. Tzadik and good. So, and I thought of that story, and I sat down, and I wrote out the story with all the details that I was in England the first time, and Rebbe gave me this thing, and I gave it to Rudolph Nissen then, and I found out about it, and therefore I was there the next year, and the Rebbe Chana led, and she said, soll sein gut. Somebody questioned it, she said, that's the bracha, soll sein gut, es kommt. I wrote all the details, and I got an answer from the Rebbe, which was very beautiful. It was a lot of, and then I vinched on, that since it's now Shnas HaTzadik, Imru Tzadik Kitova at the Rebbe, soll sein gut, and my own assessment of that word, which I tell people, as wird sein gut, if what the Rebbe wants will happen, wird allem sein gut, because that will bring Geula to the whole world. And so the Maskir told me that the Rebbe gave out back, thanking, etc., like a pile of them, with a rubber band around it, and written once, Chuas Chain. But on my zettel, where I wrote that whole story, the Rebbe wrote Chuas Chain ala Protim. Maybe ala Protim Shekosov, I don't remember 100%. I never saw that because I got this on the phone on the way to the airport. I was going back to England. Probably Yud Beis, Nissan. And just one more, in that same year, Tavshin Chav Daled, I was in New York, Chav Av, and I went there. There it was a much bigger crowd. It was in the evening, before the Rebbe's Farbrengen, Shnas Esrim. Maybe because of that, there were probably about 20, 30 people. I'm not sure. I just remember it being a different kind of atmosphere. It wasn't that intimate, sitting at a table with a l'chaim. And the Rebbetzin was recalling all the details about the histalkus of her husband and how they got the tachrichim, all these different things they had to do. Mesidus Nefesh Mamish, get certain official things from a woman who was was a communist but a Yid, and everyone had such a respect for her husband. And then we were going out. This must have been about 8 o'clock in the evening already, and or maybe I don't remember what time it was, but it was evening. And the Rebbetzin, as we were standing going out, she said, "Ich hab gesehen a Sach Größe." I have seen many great people in my day, because in my father's house, he was always visited by great Rabbanim. So I saw my father and I saw all the people that visited him. Mit my man is nicht gewesen was zu schämen sich. I had nothing to be ashamed of my husband. That's Rabbi Yitzchak. And he also had very high quality visiting Rabbanim, the Gedolei Yisrael. She said, aber ich habe kein Musch gesehen, größer wie die Gesund soll gesund sein. I never saw someone as great as the Rebbe, as my son soll gesund sein. Und die Ike was tracht die Gadlus mit Abschittes. And the main thing is that he carries his greatness in a simple way, like in a seamless way. It's not no big spiel over it. And this was the last time I saw her. A few weeks later, about 7 weeks later, was it? She passed away on Vav Tishrei. And then the Rebbe was mezakeh the world with the whole gilui of Rashi Sichos in her memory. And the Rebbe, time and again, especially in the first and in earlier years, when he said Rashi Sichos, he emphasized that Shuta Shal Mikra for Ben Chomesh. It's Rashi is there, explains it even for a child, but at the same time, it has deep inyanim in halacha, yena shel Torah, and depth. And I always, whenever I heard that from the Rebbe, I thought of that's the Rebbe is godless when I talk with Apshitis. Shalom Aleichem Chevra. I would like to share with you a few thoughts about Yud Aleph Nisan. Ubehegdim, I was asked to speak about it from the point of view of the Bachrim, specifically Tavshin Chav Beis. I hope to say a few nekudas about Tavshin Chav Beis, Chav Gimel, Lamed Ches, and also tell you a beautiful story of the Rebbe. And Mirz Hashem, before Pesach, I'll add some more about Yud Aleph Nisan and Pesach. Bichlal, it's just as well that I should tell you the point of view of Bachrim, because that which revolves around the Rebbe himself, the Bachrim of today, Baruch Hashem, have a tremendous yediyah, tremendous knowledge in it. They know, many of the Bachrim know more details or more accuracy in things which I saw at that time. But the feeling that was there, I'd like to share with you. We didn't know what's going to happen, Yud Aleph Nisan itself. On the other hand, everyone loved the Rebbe intensely, infinitely, and hoped and prayed that there's going to be something public. We were well aware of the Maimah, Hashem's foresight Tiftach from Tavshin Yud Beis, and felt that the Rebbe would certainly do something, but the prayer was that it would be public, and it would be Bepumbi, Laman Yedu. And we found, Yud Aleph Nisan was on a Sunday, and we found out on Motzi Shabbos, it was announced, and there was such a simcha, that there was a Farbrengen, it was downstairs in the shul, Bachrim, It was probably a small crowd. I remember for sure that Rabbi Yisrael Lepkovsky took a tremendous amount of mashka. I never saw before or since that he should take so much, really. And I myself, it was before the Gzeira mashka, don't forget, and Rabbi Meir Harlech must remember that Farbrengen of the Bachrim. That night went on till about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, out of sheer simcha that the Rebbe is going to Farbrengen on Yud Aleph Nisan on his own birthday. Then, when the Rebbe came into the Farbrengen, he took him with him, the Sefer Lekutei Sichos, first volume, leather bound, first time a Lekutei Sichos ever came out. That in itself was a tzir, moiridik tzir, because generally speaking, until Shavuos Tavshin Yud Ches, Sichos of the Rebbe that were Mugo were usually in Kovetz Lubavitch, in rabbinic journals like Hamoyer and Hapadis, that type of thing, but it was very, very rare. In Tavshin Yud Ches, they asked the Rebbe to be Magia every week, so Bochum will have what to say in Shul. It was called Teuchen Inyonim Lachzer Bavotek Nesiyos. I was learning in Montreal in Yud Ches. It came there for Shavuos, and Rabbi, we had a Gabbai, a Mamuna for those, about 20 came. I don't know how many copies came. It was stenciled. It was duplicated. Our Mamuna was Rabbi Pinyakov. He was then a bacha, and you had to pay 5 cents, I believe. But you could only get it with tonight that you're actually going to go speak. And that's something which pushed me to start going to shuls and speaking Yiddish, Shalashudis in Montreal, Yudches, Yutes, etc. So, from Shavuos Yudches through Shavuos Yutes, it came out. The next time Lekutei Sichos came out was for Shabbos Bereishis, Tovshin Chav Gimel. So those are the only sichos that we knew and we could hold on to, but here they were bound into a sefer with 2 special copies made, one for the Rebbe and one for the Rebbe Tzimchana. But no one had seen it before. The Rebbe came down, and generally coming to a Farbrengen with anything more than a siddur was unheard of in those days. In Tavchei, there was already a chumash on the table. That Farbrengen, there was an electricity in the hall and in everybody's feelings. The Rebbe said 2 Maimarim, which was extremely rare, although Shabbos Vayetze that year, the Rebbe said 3 Maimarim for a special reason, which is maybe spoken about at a different time. But 2 Maimarim itself, notably Purim Tovshin Yud Gimel, but at that time it was a very rare thing. And the second Maimah was after they gave a big bracha to the Rebbe in the Farbrengen, and it was Godla Oina Omein Yosim and HaMavorich was the Maimah, the second Maimah. In the middle of the Farbrengen, an elder Chassid, a Choshever, Tayere, beautiful Chassid, Reb Zalman Duchman, announced L'chaim that the Eibishter will help him, that the Rebbe should Farbrengen on Yud Aleph Nisan every 10 years, or 10 years from now. And I felt very frustrated, and I'm a betchoin. Let's ask for every year, but anyway, it happened 9 years later. The Rebbe of Farbrengen said a Maimah B'Yom HaShtei. The next night, which was Yud Beis Nisan, Monday night, after Maitiv, I was upstairs in the Zal, and a small crowd. B'chalal, Pesach was a time when people went home, especially Bachrim, who were the main inhabitants of 770. For Yud Aleph Nisan, Misama they stayed, but that night it was not that crowded in the Zal. And after Ma'ariv, the Rebbe gave Reb Shmuel Levitin a pack of dollars. Also unheard of in those days. The idea of dollars later on, years later, many years later, became regular. But the Rebbe gave out $61. It was Shnas HaShishim, and the Rebbe gave Reb Shmuel $61 towards buying mashke for the Bachrim Fabrengens, which he would Fabreng every four Rosh Chodesh, special Yom HaPagadas. So he gave money towards that mashke. I don't know if it happened before. I know, I'll soon tell you about Chav Gimel, but in Chav Beis, I saw that Rebbe gave him $61, and Reb Shmuel told the Bachrim, at the next Fabrengen, that he's going to stagger it. He's going to give it out little by little. $3 will be raffled off a girdle every Fabrengen of the Bachrim, official Fabrengen, and anybody who already won it before, you didn't have to pay for it. You just had to be present. The girdle was for those people who are there at the Fabrengen, and you could only win once. In other words, if you got $1 already, your name was not included in the girdle for the next Fabrengen. I personally got my $1, Baruch Hashem, in the Fabrengen of Lag Boimer, Tovshin Chav Beis. That's some of the things that I remember from Chav Beis. Maybe other things will come up, and I hope to update it even before Yom Tov. In Tovshin Chav Gimel, I was sent to England. I was a chosin then, and I was sent to England to be there to speak at a big concert on Beis Nissen. And I said was I want to be back for Yud Aleph. I thought maybe Rebbe's going to bring again, although it fell on a Friday. I landed on Friday morning, and I came to Rebbe Shem Tov gave me a package to give to the Rebbe Tzimchana, the Rebbe's mother. And I didn't know what to do with it because it wasn't a regular. We saw the Rebbe Zichronos everywhere, but I didn't visit her before then. And I went to Reb David, who was the contact person all the years. Reb David was the person, if you want to make an appointment, al Chosen and Kala, for example, it was customary to go for a bracha to the Rebbe Zichronos, you went through Reb David Raskin. So I went to him, I went straight from the airport to 770, got there about 7:30, during Seder Chassidus in the Zal, and I said, I have a present which Rebbe Shem Tov told me to give to Rebbe Zichronos. Will you give it to her? So, what should I do with it? What's the protocol? And Reb David said, there's a group of Chassidim that go to Vinch on the Rebbe by the Rebbe Zichronos on Yud Aleph Nissen, and you join us. We're going at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. I don't remember what time it was that it had been arranged. But I did go with them. There was maybe, I don't know how many people. It was a small number of people. Certainly, I'm almost sure there was not a minyan, including myself. They were all white beards, except for Reb David, and Solange, myself, even younger. And I gave in, she asked about England, this and that. There's another story which happened a year later, Yud Aleph Nissen, Chav Dalid, the last Yud Aleph Nissen Ba'al Madain of the Rebbe Zichronos, but I will tell that as a separate message. Im Yetz Hashem. The Rebbe gave, I don't remember when it was, it must have been Sunday night, Orla Arba'osa, because in Tovshin Chav Beis, he gave it on Yud Beis, Orla Shloisha Osa. It was Monday night, but here, Yud Beis was on a Shabbos. I don't believe it was Motzi Shabbos. It was probably Sunday night. But I remember the Inyan that the Rebbe gave Reb Shmuel, again, money for Mashke. But this time, instead of $61 or $62, he gave $5, but they were silver dollars. And I went with my Yedid, Reb Osher Zeilengol, to Reb Shmuel, possibly even Chalamoid Pesach. And we offered to give $10 each for one of those silver dollars. $10 in those days was equivalent to $100 today, probably. In purchasing power, I don't know, but in Indian, it was like $250, $300 because people didn't really have money. And Reb Shmuel said, first of all, there's only 4 left, which we assumed meant that he's buying one for himself. And second of all, he'll give it before the chasana. Osher was not yet a chasan. Osher got engaged in the winter of Chav Dalid and got married on Hey Nissen, of Tavshin Chav Dalid. So I got $1 from Reb Shmuel before my chasana, and Osher got one as well. So that was Tavshin Chav Gimel. I will tell you about Tavshin Lamed Ches. Tavshin Lamed Ches, ki yadua, was a very anxious, painful, frightening year from Shmini Atzeres. And then we heard that Rebbe was coming down to Fabreing on Yutes Kislev. So I wanted to go to be at that Fabreing. And I phoned up Rabbi Benjamin Klein, Olav Shalom, and he said, don't you dare come in. He said, he said, they're trying to see that as few people, because the Rebbe it gets nisragish when people come, and they're trying to keep it as low key, because the very fact that the Rebbe is coming down to Fabrein, he'll be with the regular crowd, that in itself will be a challenge. So I didn't go. Instead, I went for Yud Aleph Nissen. That was already a few months later. The Rebbe has been Fabreing a while. On Motzi Shabbos. I went, and my Shver, Reb Zalman Yafi, we did not coordinate or agree or anything, and we went from 2 cities and 2 different planes. We didn't know each other was going, but we both had that idea that this is a time to go. And for my Shver, it was probably a much bigger, about a bus, very Mesuda, going 2 days before Pesach. But he was there and I was there. I don't know how many guests from Me'evel Hayam came. It could be they were afraid for the Rebbe's health, but it was before it became something regular to come for Yud Aleph Nissen. What I do know is that 4 people were called into the Rabbi Chadakov's room on that Sunday, and the 4 people, and I think it might be they were the only ones that came from Me'evel Hayam, but I'm really not sure. And those 4 people were Rabbi Gerelek, Rabbi Geshem Gerelek, who came all the time, Yud Aleph Nissen. And by the way, Tavshin Lamed Beis was an exception when there was, quite a few people. Also, nothing like there was in later years, even proportionally. Rabbi Geshem Mendel Gerelek, Rabbi Nachman Sodak, who came, and Rabbi Zalman Jaffe, and myself. We were called in and given by Rabbi Chadakov, on behalf of the Rebbe, he gave each of us 18 single dollar bills with a paper clip holding them together. This was, he said that this is from the Rebbe giving to you a shliach mitzvah to give tzedakah in your home cities. He also had 3 packets of matzah, probably about 2 pounds or so, or a kilo. And 1 packet was for Rabbi Geshem Mendel, and 1 packet was for Milano. 1 packet was for Reb Zalman Jaffe for Manchester, and 1 packet was for Reb Nachman Sudak for London, with instruction from the Rebbe to give Shmuel Lu a whole matzah. So that was like, instead of me getting a whole pack of matzahs, I guess, But Rabbi Nachman was a chassid, a true chassid, knew what the Rebbe wanted, and in subsequent years he would get a pack of matzahs, and it wasn't that much. The crowd was Kanainahor growing, but he always tried, and I think every single time was able till Tavshin Nun Aleph to give me a whole matzah for from the Rebbe's matzah that came. It wasn't always that many shleimis. That was the point. So, and then Tavshin Lamed Ches at night after the Farbrengen, which was moiridik, and there's the Maimah. It's a Taraichem Maimah. Everybody should try to learn it. Vayiki Sholcha about the Eidos Chukim and Shpatim. It's very, very. It had a lot of Yesodistic things in that Maimah. There was Farbrengen Yud Gimel, but I was back in England. I went back. Oh no, that was Lamed Beis. Lamed Beis. Anyway, I went back, but the Rebbe was giving out dollars. He had about after the Farbrengen, he had some dollars, and he gave it to people who were in the hall when he was going out to go to the car to go home. This was Lamed Ches. Now, the story is a story that's completely different, and the reason I'm telling this story, and the reason I'm telling this now, and not the story of Yud Aleph Nissen, Tov Shech V'Daleh by the Rebbe Tzimchana, is because I just discovered this story. I wrote it 2 years ago. I heard it from Rabbi Yossi Hecht in South Africa. It was when we were like doing things, not traveling as much. And I speak to him, he's manless man on the phone. And he told me this story, which he heard from Reb Levi Buket. Could be many people on the group know the story, but I'm going to tell it because v'igada to levincha, and you could always get something new from a story. Levi was about 12 years old. He lived in East Flatbush. One of the neighbors in East Flatbush was Reb Yaakov Samuels, and his family of young kids, a young family. And the story happened in Tavshin Chav Daled, that the Samuel's family were going to his wife's parents for Pesach. So he asked this kid, 12, 13-year-old, Levi Buket, when you go to the Rebbe Erev Pesach to get matzah, ask for me as well. And then let's prepare. They prepared in advance a small box to put it in, like a little cotton box, and go to the post office on John Street, which is maybe a half a mile from 770, maybe a bit less, and send it express. So I won't get it the first Seder, but at least I'll have it in time for the second Seder. Now the matzahs that the Rebbe distributed on Erev Pesach, Lohoitzi, the matzahs which the Rebbe sent to other countries, obviously they were baked earlier, usually Beis Nissen. But these matzahs were matzahs mitzvah. They were baked on Erev Pesach, Achar Chatzois, which means after 12 noon, and if it was already the summer time, the daylight savings time, like this year, it would be after 1. The bakery was on the east side. Rabbi Shia Kof owned the bakery, so the Chalukah couldn't begin. They didn't start baking till 1 o'clock, till they had a pile of enough. I don't know if they sent everything all at once, or if they sent in 2 batches or something, but it meant that the Rebbe began to give out matzah 3:30. That was the time that it began, the Chalukah. And it was a long line, hundreds of people. I remember it, even though the last time I was there was in Tavshin Chav Daled. Chav Hey. Anyway, so Levi was a kid, and he's on the line. By the time he reached the Rebbe, it was 4:45. The post office closes at 5 p.m. But the Rebbe was very quick. You saw how the Rebbe did with dollars. Very quick. He gave the matzah, and it said, from Pesach. You went out, it was like a second each person, maybe even less. He asked the Rebbe, he got from the Rebbe, from Pesach, and he said, can I have for Rebbe Yaakov? The Rebbe said, Welche Rebbe Yaakov? He said, Samuel's. The Rebbe said, isn't he here, Pesach? He said, no. The Rebbe said, Zichronos, are you sure? He said, yeah, he asked me that I should ask the Rebbe for matzah for him. So the Rebbe said, well, then how's he going to get it? So he said, I'm going to the post office and I'm going to send it express. So the Rebbe said, is it possible to get there in time? He said, I'll try. And the Rebbe asked another question. The Rebbe seemed to be taking his time. Although this chalukah was very quick always, including that day, and suddenly the Rebbe was asking him a lot of questions. And then he gave him the matzah for Levi. He ran as fast as his 12-year-old legs could carry him to Don's place. And he got there at 5:03. The door was locked. He tried it, but he looked inside and he saw the people were all still there. So he banged on the door and they ignored it. He banged till they came, and he asked and he pleaded and he begged and he screamed, and they said 5 o'clock is 5 o'clock, and they would not open up the post office. And he went home and he felt really low. He's a battling, and people told him, whoever heard, why couldn't you run faster? He felt why he didn't succeed. He blamed himself for not getting there in time, and now that family is not going to have the matzah the second Seder. He felt so bad that hours later at the Seder that night in his house, when it came time for the Manishtana, he said, I don't feel well enough. He was really feeling bad, and he couldn't say the Manishtana even. His heart was aching him so much. About 11 o'clock at night, there's a knock on the door. Now, you know that Eliyahu Novi doesn't have to knock. So, opened up the door. Who's there? 11 o'clock at night. And where steht dorten? Yaakov Samuels is standing there. And what did he come for? He says, I need the food for the Kaira. But he said, oh, by the way, did you manage to get the matzah? He said, yeah, here it is. But what are you doing here anyway? So he said, this is what happened. We got up early in the morning, he, his wife, and his 3 kids, and they went to Newark Airport because they were flying to Toronto, and they got onto the plane. They were already on the plane. One of the kids was jumping around before the plane was taking off, when people were just getting on, and he got his foot stuck somehow between the seat, and it was very difficult to get that foot extricated from the seat. And so they took him to the hospital. They had to go off the plane, took him to the hospital. There was a slight fracture, Rahman al-Islam, and the hospital wanted him to stay overnight, and the family insisted and they begged. They said, it's the first Seder tonight. They took him home. The house had been made Pesachdik anyway, and somehow they got food. They had everything, and she started to prepare everything for the Seder. So it took a few hours, and they had everything, but they didn't have this roya, maybe the charaisis, the things for the Seder plate they didn't have, and they were the nearest neighbor. So they went there to ask for it. That's the story. And what I see from the story, others maybe see many other things, but 2 things. Nekuda number 1, the Rebbe from the word go felt that Samuel the Rebbe said, isn't he here? Except I'm saying, the Rebbe was talking about with a pshitas that this is where he is. And the second story, the second moifis, is that the Rebbe asked so many questions and was stalling it, Kvayochel, and because of that, he didn't get to the post office in time, and because of that, the matzah was delivered in New York to the person who the Rebbe knew he's in New York. Yetz Hashem, to be continued.